Like knights preparing for battle, these water warriors gird themselves with neoprene and Gore-Tex, helmeting heads and gathering gear as they make ready to challenge turbulent turns and swirling eddies. This is Richland Creek, flowing down Walden Ridge on the eastern edge of the Cumberland Plateau at the Laurel-Snow State Natural Area, just north of Chattanooga. Usually a quiet stream,
you could really even wade across the creek without getting your knees wet a lot of times during the summer.
the soaking rains of winter and early spring help this quiet creek take on the persona of a roaring river.
There's no vegetation on the trees and everything like that. They're not sucking up the moisture, and so a larger percentage of the water actually runs down into the creek, fills it up faster, and it holds the water longer, so we have a bigger window to actually get to kayak.
But before the kayaking comes hiking, about a mile uphill, carrying around 50 pounds of boat and gear.
So by the top, you're ready to put on and paddle back down.
There's a little wood down there.
Along the way up, they check the stream carefully, looking for potential trouble.
We'll get out and check some of the major rapids to make sure that there's not a strainer, which is a log that falls over the river. If you rush into one of those and get trapped underneath it, it could be life and death.
Usually it runs after a big rain event, so you could have dangers such as trees, down, even the rocks can shift a little bit. So we just want to make sure that everything still looks the same.
John Manley knows what the creek is supposed to look like, having kayaked this stream many times before. Today he shares some of his knowledge with J.R. First, who is paddling Richland for the first time.
The downside is you kind of have to
Move that rock.
right, because if not, it'll just turn you.
Yeah.
Now it's not a real big deal as long as you just stay loose and keep pointing downstream.
Okay.
It'll flush you out right there in the middle where the water's piling up between the shelf and the right line. There is a hole that can be kind of sticky.
See.
But planning can only take you so far. At some point, it's time to get wet, because on this run, staying dry just isn't an option.
Richland Creek would be considered a Class 4 run. There are, especially depending on water level, at least one, and sometimes even two rapids that would be pushing Class 5. There's one rapid at the top. It's got several different names, Rattlesnake, S-turn. That one, it's got a pretty sticky hydraulic, what we call a hole at the top.
There's a little 7-8 foot drop right at the bottom of a rapid called Screaming Left-Hand Turn. And it's just fun. Anytime you get to fly through the air in a little plastic boat, it's a good feeling.
Now this is not typical kayaking weather. The high today was only in the mid-30s, just enough to start melting some of this ice, which means that water is awfully cold. But for these kayakers, it's perfect. With the hiking and then paddling, you're moving enough that as long as the water's not constantly running over your skin, you're building up your own body heat and it's staying inside pretty well. Just like a wetsuit would keep you warm once you get a little water inside.
It's all about layering. The advances in technology, they have waterproof gaskets on your wrist and on your neck, and so you're nice and toasty. There's dry suits that actually zip up and you step in it. I have friends that go to work in the morning and they'll step in their dry suits with their suit and tie, zip themselves up, paddle, and then unzip their dry suit and go to work.
A lot of people do think you're crazy when you tell them. Sometimes I complain about being cold. My wife will say something like, if you're gonna be dumb, you have to be tough. But it's when the fun stuff runs.
Of course, the biggest key to having fun is being safe. Just like on their hike up, they stop and look over the bigger rapids, helping those less familiar with the stream pick a good line.
That's a great way to learn new creeks, new rivers, is go with somebody who's done the river before, who has some experience, who knows the lines, and who's willing to get out and set safety for you.
It's smart to take some time and try to catch some of the harder eddies. You'll notice a lot of the big rapids and stuff like that have these big pools at the bottom where you can recover. So if you know you have something like that, then pushing it a little bit harder on one of the harder lines, practicing some harder skills where you have a little room for error, makes you a better paddler all around.
While there is no denying these kayakers love the thrill and adventure of Whitewater, that's not the only thing that brings them here.
You get to see nature from a different perspective. You know, there's a lot of these rivers that are quite remote. Only way to see it is beyond the water. And so you just get to see things that very few people actually get to see.
No motor, just your own energy and then the natural world around you. Getting to ride the waves and let the current push you downstream, you get a totally different perspective on the wilderness that you can enjoy.
Most of the time it's nice just to come out here and not see anybody but other people who are having a good time, just hikers, you know, photographers. There's some guys that were bouldering earlier, so as you're paddling down the river, everyone's got a grin on their face. I love bringing people out here. We had 2 new guys today who had never been out here before, so it's nice to see smiles on their faces at the end of the day.
While we couldn't really see if JR was smiling as he neared the end of his first run on Richland, it sure sounded like he was having a lot of fun.
It was an absolute blast. Sometimes if you get going really fast and don't take a lot of breaks or anything like that, you realize the hiking's a whole lot longer than the paddling, but as long as you're enjoying both, then you can't have a bad time. Would love to do more than 1 run in a day when we have time.
They'll also need some more rain, which helps explain these paddlers' unique relationship with wet weather.
The guys I work with, they're all complaining about the rain, but I'm like a little boy, I get excited. So, especially if it's gonna rain for 2 or 3 days. They know I won't be around much because I'll be hitting rivers.
I'm Ken Tucker on the Wild Side.